I would like to continue this morning with my discussion of Rabbi Aaron Kotler, who was one of the most seminal figures that really changed the face of American Jewry. And there may be, I don't remember exactly what I spoke about I know the general thing I spoke about last week. So if I repeat a couple of things, it just means that we'll remember it better than we did in the past. Okay. But before I begin, if you don't know what Rabbi Kotler looks like, I'd like to show you two pictures. This is, I don't know if it was originally color or if it was rendered into color. I'll put it up against here. Okay, that's a picture of him. And then this is a picture that hangs in Rabbi Wasserman's office, and in many students of Lakewood, although Rabbi Wasserman and Rabbi Kagan, I know Joe Yanofsky mentioned last week at the end of the class that they're students of his. There are still some students who are alive who are leading institutions, but those who studied under him, you have to remember that he passed away over 60 years ago. So assuming they were 17, 18, 20 when they're in the yeshiva, they're at least into their 80s, many of them into their 90s. So,
Are you recording?
yeah. Today, I'm not going to delve into Rabbi Kotler's involvement in Holocaust rescue, which we spoke about last week. But there is one thing that I wanted to read to you because I found more of an original source. If you recall, I said last week, I didn't say the year, but in 1945, Rabbi Kotler came to meet with Henry Morgenthau. And that was the time, this was, and I'll read to you directly. This comes from H.com, but the original thing that I had seen was what I'm going to read to you today, but H.com took it from somewhere. But this was the original account of what happened. Remember, I told you that he said some very sharp words to Morgenthau in Yiddish, and I said, this doesn't cut it. Whatever I had last week didn't cut it. There was more. So here, you're going to hear it today, okay? Shortly in February 1945, Irving Bunim, who I said last week was one of the great lay people who was really a right-hand man. There were a very few people who will speak about how the honor of Torah and of Rosh Yeshiva, I'm not talking about congregational rabbis, but of Torah scholars, and Torah scholarship was at a very, very low point. Actually, not just in the 1940s, but from the time that American Jewry started to become an entity in itself, until maybe the 1970s, 1980s, maybe even a little later, the leadership of Torah Jewry was not well respected, and oftentimes, perhaps looked down upon. And we'll speak about that more today. But there were a few people who, and we'll mention two of them today. One was Irving Bunim, and who David knew, and he did anything he could to help Rabbi Kotler in many, many different things. So shortly in February 1945, Irving Bunim arranged for an urgent meeting with Henry Morgenthau, and he was accompanied. I think he was the Secretary of Treasury. We said last week he was accompanied by Rabbi Aaron Kotler and Rabbi Avraham Kalmanovitz, both of whom had escaped Europe and were using any means at their disposal to try to save European Jews. They came with a desperate request. The Musi negotiations were underway, which involved the payment of close to $1 million to the Germans in exchange for releasing Jews from concentration camps and sending them to Switzerland. I don't know if this was directly the Eichmann deal. Oh, by the way, I did look up. Somebody said last week, I think it was Marcia, at the end of the class, Eichmann had actually been to Palestine in 1937. I looked this up. There was, and the reason that I don't think it's fake news, because there were numerous accounts of this. The British, he was disguised as a professor who came as with his apprentice on a boat from Germany to Israel. The British smelled something. They suspected something fishy. They didn't believe he was who he said he was, so they gave him an overnight visa. One night, he came to Haifa, as Marcia pointed out last week. Eichmann Yimach Shemo came to Haifa. This was before the plan for the final solution. At that point, at least from Germany and later even from other parts, they had planned on getting all the Jews out of Germany and sending them elsewhere. And one of the places, this was before the establishment of the state, and there wasn't not many, I mean, relatively speaking, in 48, there were, 600,000 Jews in Israel. So in 37, there were quite a few less. But he thought that that maybe that would be one place where they could settle him. So he came, and I don't know if he had to leave after one day or he went to Egypt and tried to come back in, and then they didn't let him back in. So I don't know which account was correct. But after that, he said he was there one night. He was in Haifa, and he said, "Nope, this is not a good place. It's not gonna work." One thing that he felt that maybe it wouldn't work. Another thing was he felt that if he would put too many Jews in one place, so then he's going to have a Jewish. He wasn't the prophet, but he's going to have a place which is going to become a Jewish place, and he didn't want that. Now we know that Rommel came very close. As not the first time in 44 or 43, Rommel came very, very close to Israel, and the Jews in Israel were preparing graves by the thousands, literally, and by the hand of God, by the grace of God, he never entered Palestine. That wasn't Eichmann, that was General Rommel. Anyway, I don't think so. What we said last week about Eichmann is that he had a deal where he was going to sell Jewish heads for $75 a Jewish head to release. I don't know that this was it, but there was a negotiation underway, and it involved the payment of close to $1 million to the Germans in exchange for releasing Jews from concentration camps and sending them to Switzerland. The Vathat, which was the organization to save European Jewry, had the astronomical sum pledged to them by another Jewish organization. Yet that organization insisted that if you're going to do that, you have to have official agreement from the U.S. government approval to transfer the funds through American agents in Switzerland, meaning you have to get the U.S. government involved. This other agency, I'm not sure who it was. I have my suspicions, but I'm not sure what it was. The Vathat, which was the one that Rabbi Kotler headed, and Rabbi Kalmanovitz, appealed to Morgenthau to grant them official permission. Morgenthau responded, and remember, Irving Bunin was with them. Apparently, Rabbi Kalmanovitz was there too. I didn't know. Morgenthau responded that American foreign policy was not to pay ransom to the enemy. Millions for defense, but not 1 cent for tribute. Okay, here comes the part with Rabbi Kotler. Rabbi Kotler did not speak English, and Secretary Morgenthau did not understand Yiddish. So Bunim was serving as their translator. However, Morgenthau's tone was clear to Rabbi Kotler even before Bunim said a word. The answer was no. The United States government will not do this. Unable to hold back his emotions, Rabbi Kotler looked at Morgenthau with his piercing blue eyes, which on the color picture, really, apparently, many stories are told about his piercing eyes. With a voice shaking, he pointed at the Secretary of Treasury and said in Yiddish, "Bunim, tell him that if he cannot help rescue his fellow Jews at this time, then he is worth nothing, and his position is worth nothing. One single Jewish life is worth more than all the positions in Washington." Pretty sharp words for a European rabbi who had been in the country a few years, and to say in Yiddish to tell the American Secretary of Treasury. After a few awkward moments, Bunim began translating, somewhat softening the rabbi's message as he spoke. Rabbi Kotler realized his words were not being conveyed accurately, and he said in Yiddish, "Nein, nein, Bunim, zog dem was ich hab gesagt." No, Bunim, tell him exactly what I said. Bunim realized that this was not a time for social niceties. He cleared his throat and silently prayed, knowing that countless Jewish lives hinged on his success. "Sir, Rabbi Kotler feels that because you are afraid of losing your prominent position in government, you may be unwilling to help us and your fellow Jewish brothers and sisters. He wants you to know that one Jewish life is worth more than any office." Hearing this, Morgenthau turned white and placed his head on the desk, covering his face in his hands. "Tell the rabbi that I am a Jew. Tell him I'm willing to give up my life, not just my position, for my people." So he did a 180 over here, which was incredible. Finally, and he went and he spoke to the president. Apparently, this plan never came to fruition. Right? We don't know of any such, Jews being released in exchange for money. But Rabbi Kotler didn't back down. If he was committed, he was dedicated to a cause, and this was the cause of Jewish lives. He wasn't going to back down from anybody. Now, I hope later today we'll get we'll get to an article regarding President Truman and the creation of the State of Israel. We may or may not get it today. What I wanted to do these few weeks, because this thing about Rabbi Kotler will be at least one more week, maybe two. I wanted to speak about his leadership. I wanted to speak about his commitments, his dedication, and that he was unshakable if he believed something. And then I'd like to also speak about the greatness, as I told you many times, that if somebody could be the greatest scholar in the world, if he's not also great, ben adam l'chavero, between man and fellow man, and his kindness and his sensitivity to other people, then they never made it. Rabbi Kotler was that also, but I'm not going to speak about that part of his life right now. When Rabbi Kotler came to America, as we mentioned last week, there were a few yeshivas around. RJJ was one of them, but that was only through high school, right? RJJ was only through high school. RJJ stood for Rabbi Jacob Joseph, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef, who was the first and only chief rabbi of New York. He was a great, great scholar who came from Europe. They thought that he could change American Jewry, especially being in New York. And shortly after he came, he was standing in front of the congregation. He had a stroke, and then he tried to come up once again because he was such a scholar. After the stroke, he thought he had recuperated. He came up, he couldn't speak, and he just broke down crying, and that was the end of his career as a rabbi. I don't know how long. He didn't live very long afterwards, but nobody ever took that position. There was never again a chief rabbi of New York. The school, which was known as RJJ, Rabbi Jacob Joseph, was named after him. Amongst many other great Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Kagan and Rabbi Wasserman of Denver both studied as young children in RJJ. And although if you've met or seen Rabbi Wasserman, you know him, he was a brilliant man. His memory is far from what it used to be, to say the least, but he can tell you stories from 80, 85 years ago in RJJ as if they happened yesterday, and about his teachers there, and the reverence that they had for their rabbis in Rosh Yeshiva. But when Rabbi Aaron came to America, although you had, as I said last week, Torah Das, Chaim Berlin, RJJ through high school, maybe one or two others, there was no such thing as pure Torah study for post-high school students for its own sake, without any other education, just for Torah study, the way that they had created scholars in Europe. Rabbi Aaron's mission was to transplant that to the United States, that the United States would really create great Torah scholars and would create a respect for Torah learning. I mean, over the years, much of the Torah support for Torah came from Jews who weren't even Shomer Shabbos, but they had it in their blood from their parents and grandparents that supporting Torah was key. And even though it was a struggle to support these places, and the wealth back then, obviously, it was not like the wealth is now, these people still support it. And I can tell you, I worked for Yeshiva Toras Chaim. There are many people who are not living the life that the yeshiva, teaches the students and everything. But today, there's a certain respect for what the yeshiva does. And I'm talking about in Denver, but this is across the board in the United States. There's a certain respect for what the yeshiva does and acknowledgement that they are vital to the cause of Jewish people. Maybe people think they're number one on the cause, it doesn't matter, but they understand that without the Torah, the Jewish people have no future. They haven't been able, and they wouldn't be able to survive. But I remember in my I'm here 40 years now, and I started working for the yeshiva 39 years ago, 40 years ago, 1986, January of 86. It's almost 40 years now. There were supporters of the yeshiva who did not live the life that was being taught in yeshiva, or not anything close to it, but they were major supporters. Again, they got it from their parents, their grandparents. They had it inside here. That almost doesn't exist today unless somebody is convinced and sees and has a relationship with the yeshiva. That generation is gone. That just because they had heard it from their parents and grandparents, it was part of them. But in America, Torah wasn't respected. And to have a yeshiva that would be after high school, that would be, especially people have the American dream that Jewish kids have to go to college, and that's the only way they can earn a living, and we have to add to the prestige of the Jews in the United States, which we see now 70, 80 years later is unfortunately, it's turned out to be, in many cases, a great fallacy, that there were many, many people who were opposed to Rabbi Aaron. And even the other Rosh Yeshiva, even other rabbis in America, it can't be done. You don't understand the American psyche. Americans live with much more opulence even then than they did back in Europe. And they tried to explain to him that in the face of American materialism, he'll never succeed. If you knew Rabbi Aaron, you knew that he was not put off by these arguments. If he felt that something was vital, so he fought for it. He adhered to his goal of opening a yeshiva solely supported to Torah, and even though they told him, the supporters of Torah said it's not possible, he said that, and at one point, there were people who were supporting him who said that if you continue in this way, we're going to resign from the board that you created. And he said, I prefer to serve as a beadle in a synagogue than to be Rosh Yeshiva of a yeshiva that is not committed solely to Torah. So when they heard that, they saw that Rabbi Kotler was serious about it, and they decided not to resign. Now, you can agree with the opinion, or you can not agree with the opinion, and I understand that people who are not in the yeshiva world, and even many people who are in, might not agree with that approach. But Rabbi Aaron wasn't just fighting for the yeshiva. Rabbi Aaron was fighting for the future of American Jewry. He knew that without having yeshivas like that as a model and being at the top, even if there would be many other institutions, American Jewry would not survive. And as we said last week, he had a tradition from Reb Chaim Volozhin, America was going to be the last stop in the exile. And it couldn't be if it didn't have serious Torah study. Now you go here in Denver, you go in many, many cities throughout the United States. Denver's a small city relative to that. There's students, kollels, yeshivas, people who are devoted to Torah study. Some will go to school afterwards when they finish high school, in almost all cases, right? But some will go to college, some won't, some will go to the business world. But while they're there, their life is devoted to Torah study. Without Reb Aaron, that wouldn't have happened. The face of American Jewry was changed, undoubtedly, by Rabbi Aaron Kotler. Now, again, he had lay people who joined the cause, and of course, ultimately, he got other rabbis to join the cause. Now, when he came to America and he opened up the yeshiva in 1943, as I think we said last week, he had to fundraise for the yeshiva, which was a very, very, very hard job. So half the week, he lived in Borough Park. He had a small apartment with his wife in Borough Park. And half the week, he would come back to Lakewood, and day and night, he would be in the yeshiva. He had a room in the dorm with the other students. And he on Shabbos, I don't know if his wife joined him every week, but they ate the meals with the students on a regular basis. He felt that I don't know if he did it for himself, he did it for the students, so the students should be able to learn from him and see him. He was with the students. And okay. Yes.
Torah Das.
Yes.
I lived in Scranton for a while, and everybody there from the previous generation went to Torah Das, even though many were not like you wouldn't know they were yeshiva people.
I'll repeat that in a moment. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. Was it Rabbi Pam there or Rabbi Schwad? Who was in Torah Das?
Rabbi Pam wasn't. And it's saying that she lived in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and many of the rabbis there had learned in Torah Das. And it was a great yeshiva. It just wasn't at the level of Lakewood. And they did have, by the way, revered and great rabbis who came over from Europe. By the way, the head of the yeshiva since its inception in the 1960s, and he still is head of the yeshiva today, is Rabbi Yaakov Schneidman, and he is a student of Rabbi Aaron Kotler. Okay, so even though you knew other rabbis in Scranton, that may have been wonderful. I mean, they had
lay people.
Oh, lay people. Okay, so there we go. Okay,
Went
yeah,
to
Torah Das was a good yeshiva, one wonderful yeshiva. Okay. Another thing was that there were two organizations in America for Orthodox rabbis. One was called the Agudas HaRabbonim, and one was called the Rabbinical Council of America, the RCA. The RCA was today we would call associated, not exclusively, but more with the modern Orthodox world. The Agudas HaRabbonim had many old European rabbis in it who really were scholars and really were great people who had come over and had to take jobs in the most, like Galveston, Texas, which was a port that many, many Jews came through, and all these favorfina cities throughout the United States. Rabbi Kotler saw that they became weak. They were rabbis, and they were giving in to the whims, whatever, all right, this is what you want, otherwise I'm not going to make it. And those who didn't oftentimes lost their jobs. Rabbi Aaron stood up like a lion, and he said, you cannot be like that. You're going to destroy the congregations, you're going to destroy Judaism. That you may lose people, but those who you hold on to are going to be the future. They're going to be the next generation. Their grandchildren have a chance. And for a number of years, Rabbi Aaron was able to change the way that the Agudas Rabbanim, these rabbis, approach things. Apparently, after he passed away, it went back for a while. Today, it's quite a strong organization, although not as well known, perhaps, as the RCA, the Rabbinical Council of America. There was a time when, just to show you how people felt about it. I remember when I was a student in yeshiva, there was a great man. His name was Rabbi Chaim Friedlander. He's known well today in the yeshiva world because he passed away in 1985. And there were many, many books that he had that the yeshiva students study today. And I remember once he spoke to us. It was every week, Wednesday night, he would give a talk in the Beis Medrash. It was more of an ethics and life thing talking. Well, he didn't give the Talmud share or anything like that. And I remember once he said, and I knew it was true. He said, in America, when they ask, like, what's he worth? So $10 million, $15 million. He said, don't you understand the fallacy of that? A person is not worth what he has in money. A person is worth his goodness, his kindness, the Torah that he has. That's his worth. And in America, I remember telling you, in America, they value everything by money. So here's a story you see where one time Rabbi Aaron came and he spoke to a bunch of American rabbis, and he told them how they had to elevate themselves and lift themselves up to higher standard. So one of the rabbis was there, and he asked the guy sitting next to him, what's his position? He didn't know who Rabbi Kotler was. Right? He said, he's the Rosh Hashiva of Lakewood. Now remember, he passed away in 1962, so this is all before that. This is probably in the 50s, maybe in the late 40s. And listen to this question that the rabbi asked the other one. He said, how much does he earn a week? Right? So he answered him about $50, which wasn't much money even back then, apparently. So the rabbi said, what a nerve Rabbi Kotler has, preaching to us senior rabbis about what to do when he's worth $50 a week and we're worth many times that amount. What right does he have to tell us? You see even how American rabbis were looking at him, which is, we always say that the Orthodox rabbinate get paid a lot less than the conservative and the Reform rabbinate. Yeah, but they contribute a lot more to Yiddishkeit, I think. All right, you know what? It's even irrelevant. But obviously, the amount that you get paid, and the proof is school teachers. Look how much, at least in Jewish schools, look how much they get paid, and they're worth a lot more than a lot of other professions that are out there. That was a plug to have the salaries of the Jewish school teachers raised. Okay. Also, he sent out people to many cities. Now, the fact that we had a Lakewood Yeshiva in Denver was not a result of Rabbi Aaron directly, because he was no longer alive in 1967, when Rabbi Wasserman and Rabbi Kahn, who was no longer alive, and Rabbi Kagan, who came 6 months later, came here. But it was something that he had started already in his lifetime, and then his son, Reb Schneer, took over. And he was, by the way, apparently Rosh Hashiva for the exact amount of days and years that his father was. Interesting thing. Schneer died in 1982. I remember him. I saw him once or twice. I mean, I knew who he was, but I only saw him once or twice. And he sent out students to places that people said nothing could ever grow there. But eventually, like Minneapolis, Denver, other places where the seeds eventually sprouted and they became cities that were recognizably Jewish. There are very few cities in the United States, and maybe you can say I'm wrong. And if you do, that's fine, but there are hardly any cities in the United States that would have reputations as vibrant Jewish cities that don't have a yeshiva or a kollel in them. They fade away. Eventually they fade away. And that's the way that's just the way it is. Okay. Here's a wonderful story about the impact that Rabbi Aaron had when he spoke to somebody, because not only did he speak with passion and fire, but people saw the truth coming out of him. Now, they didn't always change because of that, but they saw it. So there was this fellow who wrote this book that I told you, Rabbi Shlomo Lawrence, who was a member of the Knesset. He invited an English philanthropist, Sir Isaac Wolfson, to come to pay a visit to the Torah Children's Village of Sdei Chemed in Israel. So after seeing the Torah village for children there, I guess I don't know if these were children from broken homes or orphans. I'm not familiar with that particular children's home, children's village. He gave a large sum of money to the village, and then he was invited to speak, right? And this is what he said. He said such an interesting thing. He said when Rabbi Aaron Kotler visited London years earlier, the Rosh Yeshiva had sought an interview, and he said, I avoided the meeting because I knew he was going to ask me for money for his yeshiva. However, when he let me know that it would be satisfied with a 5-minute meeting, I said, okay. So this is, again, every quote, unless it's written down at the time, is not an exact quote, but here he has it in quotes. When we met, I was so spellbound by his personality that our meeting lasted for 2 hours. Every minute of our conversation gave me immense satisfaction. In the end, I said to him, surely the rabbi didn't come just to entertain me with this wonderful conversation. He must be seeking a donation for his yeshiva. So here I'm going to show you something is like we saw this over and over with stories of Rabbi Aaron, and his students saw it. He said, I was surprised when he replied that wasn't the case for him at all. When I asked him, if you didn't come here for, what did you come for? I wanted you to understand that you should support yeshivas and Torah institutions, which is something that you haven't yet merited doing. So there's a couple of things here. First of all, he said the fact that you're not supporting them, you're missing the merit. That's the greatest merit you can have to support Torah study. But he said, aside from that, and the way I understand the story is, had he asked for after giving over this message, had he asked for money for his yeshiva, his message would have the message would have been lost, because it's still, after everything, looks like it was their personal. He preferred, and he thought that it was more important that Sir Isaac Wolfson, for his benefit and for the benefit of the world at large, should know how important it is to support yeshivas. And then if he would, Lakewood would get, Lakewood would not get, but other yeshivas would get. And as we said last week, in Rabbi Aaron's heart, this was as important as his own yeshiva, that the Torah should be supported. Reb Noach Weinberg, this was, one time also, I remember when they tell the story, same with Rabbi Aaron, but he came to a place and he met somebody, and he was a wealthy person, and he raised money for another institution. And when somebody asked him, you had the opportunity, why didn't you do it? He said, they need it more than we do. It's God's Torah. It's not my Torah, your Torah, it's God's Torah. So he would, Reb Noach was like this as well. So Isaac Wolfson said, I promised him that I would do as he wished, but then I forgot about it. And for years, I didn't do it. He said, but now that Shlomo Lawrence brought me to the children's village, he said this at the thing, he said, and I see what happens when children study Torah, I realize the value, and I'm going to follow through on my word. And from then on, he became a major supporter of Torah institutions as well. So, and it was years later, Aaron wasn't even alive anymore, right? But the impact of his words that he had with his conversation, that had such an incredible effect on him. We don't have time to go through everything, so.
Little kid, I saw Rabbi Aaron Kotler in the 1940s in Lakewood, leading a parade of his students on Simchas Torah in the street.
And Lakewood wasn't what it is now, but yeah,
It was dirt.
they were probably holding the Torah and dancing around him as well, right?
Yeah, and it was Lakewood was a quiet, sleepy, pleasant town, very nice place.
Okay, last week we spoke about how in the late 1940s or early 1950s, the state of Israel had 4 streams of education. From the religious Torah community was the 4th stream, actually. There were 3 others from no religion at all, maybe that catered to the kibbutzim, and then you had those in between. But at one point, the state of Israel decided they're going to do away. There are only going to be two streams. One was a non-religious stream, and one was a religious stream that was in accordance with what the government determined. Now, this battle has happened throughout Jewish history, that governments, this happened to have been a Jewish government, but they were a secular Jewish government in Israel, that governments have tried to decide what kind of education the Jewish educational system should have.
Wrong people.
And they're the wrong people. So there's a couple of reasons for that. But
Yes.
right? Aside from politics and everything else, and this happened. When this happened in Israel, Rabbi Aaron and the other great rabbis understood that if they're going to take away our yeshiva system and our Beis Yaakov system and give them true, loyal Torah Jewish education rather than a politically oriented Jewish education where the learning is not in depth and so on. We're talking about here kids through high school. We're not talking about here older students. We've lost the next generation of truly committed, absolutely committed Jews. That's when Chinuch Atzmai, the independent educational system, was established, which today has over 80,000 children in it. So that we spoke about that last week. I want to read to you something that Mr. Stephen Klein, and I said to you that I spoke to you about Irving Bunim. There was another great layman, a wealthy businessman named Stephen Klein, who I know less about because I've read about Irving Bunim. But Stephen Klein, he says as follows. He got of a few philanthropists together, and he says Rabbi Aaron was shaking, and he said, "Listen to me carefully. They intend to steal the children from us. In Eretz Yisrael, this is taking place in America. In Eretz Yisrael, they've decided to cancel the various streams in the educational system, thus undermining the existence of the fourth stream, which contains the true Torah institutions, which provides Torah education for our children. Right now, we need to make a massive effort to establish an independent Torah educational system. Funds have to be raised with all possible urgency." We're talking about 53 now. $75,000 needs to be raised immediately, right, to get started. And he couldn't carry on. Stephen Klein says Rabbi Aaron couldn't carry on speaking. He just cried, and he felt that it was a fateful moment. And then he said, everything is in danger. Our educational institutions, the Torah studies, Talmud Torah, but he wasn't talking about the American Talmud Torah. He meant the elementary school for young children, the Beis Yaakov schools, they're all liable to lose their special religious character. Of course, after such an appeal, said Mr. Klein, my response was positive. And he became chairman of Chinuch Atzmai in the United States, and he accomplished a great deal being a right-hand man of Rabbi Kotler. He said that in the last days of Rabbi Aaron's life, he went to visit Rabbi Aaron in the hospital. Now, apparently, Rabbi Aaron had cancer, and he was withering away, and he was in pain. In his last days, he was in Mount Sinai Hospital, and he said when he saw Rabbi Aaron, he was shocked to the core to see how Rabbi Aaron looked. He said the dreadful illness had overcome his frail body. His face was horrifyingly shrunken. It was hard for him to get the words out of the mouth. And then he says, only his blue eyes, those clear, pure eyes that captured every Jewish heart, took possession of me as well. And listen to this. He made an effort to turn his head towards me and with great difficulty said a few words. And I heard him whisper, Halt de Chinuch Atzmai. Look after Chinuch Atzmai. He could hardly speak, but that was his last wish. That make sure that the educational system for the Torah children of Israel continues. This was his final testament to me. His eyes closed and he didn't continue. I left the room and burst into tears. I was well aware that Rabbi Aaron had drummed this into my mind. Torah Jewry's future existence depended on this fundamental enterprise providing pure Torah education in our Holy Land. And then something that I mentioned before, and this Stephen Klein said, something else that he impressed upon me was that educational policy is set by the Torah giants of the generation who are capable of determining what constitutes pure Jewish education. Not by lay people who think they know better, even if they're on the board of schools, not by people who support the schools, who want to institute their policies because they think they have money. You know, they have a saying in Yiddish, Devers hat the Meya hat the Deya, which means the mayor means the one who has the money, basically means whoever has the geld, he's the one who gets to get his opinions fulfilled. But that's not so. It should, I mean, it's oftentimes like that in politics and other things. In Torah education, it cannot be like that. And he says, Stephen Klein himself says, as for communal workers and supporters, our role is confined to helping establish and support these institutions, providing them with a sound financial basis and organizational efficiency, not to determine policy for this. This is such an important lesson, because oftentimes, even we've seen it in Denver, you see it in many cities, probably in all cities, where the lay people don't like a certain way that the great sages of Israel have determined that this is the path that they should follow, and they try to veer from it. But they're not the ones who should be determining the educational system. Yes.
What, that Irving Buren was a close friend of my father's childhood friend, and they were friends throughout their lives. I also knew Stephen Klein. Stephen Klein's son, George, went to high school with me. And this was Yeshiva University High School. And the split was, it's like the split in Israel. Torah, Yeshiva University's motto was Torah Umada.
Right.
You had to be very excellent and also excellent in science and in the secular studies.
Right.
Which my father connected with. He didn't, and that goes to Israel too, because the original settlers in Israel were socialists. They were Shomer HaTzair.
Right. The problem with them is that with that they weren't Torah and science. They were just they were just secularists. Yeah.
And the Torah people were just Torah. But the thing is, Israel could never have been established because the Torah people wouldn't have formed.
Nobody's not. I don't know how God has his own ways to work. I've said many times, isn't it interesting that the state of Israel, or the return of the Jewish people to Israel, was mainly done by people who worked the fields and who didn't know what Shabbos was and ate pig and lived on secular kibbutzim, you know, where they shared everything. Huh?
Theodore Herzl didn't know how to.
Yeah, well, it's hard. He didn't know what he was getting into,
Right.
And originally he had no idea. His idea for homeland for a people was Uganda. He accepted Uganda actually, but it fell apart because he was just looking for a place where there wouldn't be anti-Semitism. Now, God forbid, but I'm just saying, had they gone to Uganda, there would have been less anti-Semitism in Uganda than there is in Israel. But that's not a reason they should have gone there. I'm just making that as a statement. But yes, that's true. Why God does it that way, I don't know, but that clearly is the case that they helped bring it about. Now, when Rabbi Aaron took the helm of Chinuch Hatzmoi, the responsibility, he was living in America. Remember, we spoke last week, he was going back and forth. He went a number of times a year to Israel. But the great rabbis in America, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, the Kapizhnitzer Rebbe, the Novominsker Rebbe of blessed memory, they represented Chinuch Hatzmoi here, and they felt that it was vital. Again, American Jewry has to know that part of their ability to be able to survive in America as Jews is by the merit of them supporting Torah and Eretz Yisrael. That's how the sages looked at it then, and that's how they looked at it now. Even though they were all here, and these were truly great, great people that I just mentioned, they felt they had to be supportive of this educational stream in Eretz Yisrael. They would go door to door trying to raise money. 8 to 11 o'clock, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. every day. They would go out and they would raise money. And most people, they knew they were great rabbis. If somebody like that would come to our door, whoa, you know, after they're gone. If today's rabbis would come, I don't know how they would feel. But just, by the way, because of what's happening over the last year and a half in Eretz Yisrael, that the government has shut down most of the support for the kollel and yeshivas. So some of the great rabbis from Eretz Yisrael have come to America. Last year, in 2 weeks, they raised $107 million. And they were just here recently, and I think they raised even more this time. The American Jewry feels that they have to have that merit, and Torah and Eretz Yisrael can't go by the wayside, or else, God forbid, whatever success we have in Eretz Yisrael, we believe wouldn't be there if we don't have the merit of the Torah. But I want to tell you a story. I started off with this today. The lack of esteem that they had for Torah. One day there was a very wealthy man, and these rabbis together, Rabbi Kamenetsky, Rabbi Aaron Kotler, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, they went to visit him. They thought maybe if they would come as a delegation, they would get, they would get a nice contribution from him. And again, they weren't raising money for themselves or their own institutions. Remember, right? This was, they didn't make an appointment because probably correctly so, they figured if they would try to make an appointment, they wouldn't get an appointment. So they all showed up at the office. Now, I mean, I can't even imagine knowing who those people were. Those 5 people show up at the office, and the secretary said, how can I help you? He said, and this fellow, Shlomo Lawrence, who's a member of Knesset, traveled with them. And it was probably New York is my guess. And she said, these rabbis have come to see Mr. So-and-so. So she goes into the office. She comes out a minute later. Sorry, Mr. So-and-so is not in. Now, clearly, aside from that, he just wasn't interested in seeing them. And basically, he slapped them in the face. So it was obvious that she was lying because her boss told her to do so. And that was it. So they left. What are they going to do? They left. If it would have been like Wolfson, not this Wolfson, but the one Zev Wolfson who passed away a few years ago, in those days he didn't have the security, he would jump over the desk and run into the person's office. I mean, there's stories about him like that also. That couldn't happen today anymore, probably. Not if you went to a senator. He did that in senators' offices. But today you couldn't, you wouldn't be able to do that. So after the rabbis left, Rabbi Lawrence stayed on, and he asked her, he gave his card to the secretary and said, please give it to Mr. So-and-so. Now, his card said that he was a member of Knesset, right? So she gave it to him, and he said, sure, he can come in. So Shlomo Lawrence, who had just been with these rabbis who had seen them disgraced and disdained, right, walked in. And when he walked in, he says he doesn't know where he got it inside of him to say this. He said, and this is himself, quoting himself, I asked him, do you know what Gehenna is? Those of you don't know, Gehenna is hell, purgatory, right? And the guy said, sure. And listen to me, there isn't a deep enough place in Gehenna for you. You treated these Gedolei Yisrael, these giants of Torah, and these leaders of the Jewish people, refusing to meet them, while me, a Knesset member, you're willing to welcome, even though I'm just a layman. He said, once the words came out of his mouth, I said, how the heck did that happen? He said about himself, like, where did that come from? But he said he must have been so personally incensed by the way these great people were treated. And it made a positive impression on him. And he said, how can I make amends? So Rabbi Lawrence said, I recommend that you go chase after him and apologize and invite them back in. And he did. He ran after them. He caught up to them. He invited them back in. And then he gave them a much larger donation of what they would have expected at the beginning. The story is only told to show what scorn and people weren't interested in these people. They weren't interested in the furtherance of Torah for the most part. Of course, there were exceptions. And even when the other rabbis that went out morning to morning, they would get, a few dollars here, a few dollars there. Together, it added up, but they didn't make much. Rabbi Aaron used to send during intercession, between Pesach vacation and Sukkot vacation, he used to send out the students. I remember they used to come with small pushkas. I used to, as a child, collect for this. They used to come to the yeshiva. I used to go. I lived in a 6-story apartment building, and we were a few Jews. We were the only Shomer Shabbos Jews, even though there were a number of Jewish German immigrants who lived there. And I would go in my apartment building with my pushka door to door, asking them to support support education for children in Israel. So I was a cute kid, maybe. I had dimples. So, the neighbors gave me 6 floors. So I made $20, $30.
What color was the pushka?
Blue. It was a light blue.
Light blue.
Yeah, it wasn't the JNF. It was a light blue. It was a round light blue. So, yeah. So, and he used to send the older students out, and they also, bit by bit, we used to collect together and they'd make some money. But that was the disdain. Baruch Hashem, things have changed so much over the years. Not that everybody loves Torah scholars or rabbis, etc., but there's a much greater respect now than there is then. People have also seen the way American Jewry has gone and the assimilation rates of those who are not involved in Torah and the intermarriage rates of those who are not involved in Torah. And hopefully, they can appreciate that they may not have that lifestyle, but without that world, there is no future for the Jewish people. And at times when Rabbi Aaron would go out, he once the director of the yeshiva said, we haven't paid our bills in 5 months. He said, what can I do? He said, I'm raising money for Chinuch Hatzmoi. And the director said to him, but this is your own yeshiva. And he said, Chinuch Hatzmoi is more important than Lakewood. These are the children of the future. I mean, how many people would be able to say that about their own institutions? We don't even like to give names of donors to others who give to us. Right? I try to overcome that. That's one of my things that I'm working on it for decades, that I shouldn't be like that. But that's how it was at the time. Rabbi Aaron changed all of that. Okay, thank you, everybody. We'll continue one or two more sessions about Rabbi Kotler. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are on Parshat Ki Teitzei. Parshat Ki Teitzei, about right in the middle of Elul. It has 74 mitzvahs. It's on page 1046, 1047. 74 mitzvahs, which is more than any other parsha in the Torah. It's just under 15% of the total number of mitzvahs, 613 mitzvahs. So it has about 15% of the total mitzvahs in the Torah. There are many and varied mitzvahs. I don't know whether we'll have a chance to touch all of them, but I want to go through the parsha and show you how Rashi connects certain of the mitzvahs together, because it's really a mitzvah gereris mitzvah, an avera gereris avera kind of concept, that one mitzvah drags along another mitzvah. The reward for mitzvah in this world is yet another one. And so we have 74, and since we're in the middle of Elul, this Shabbos, you still have time to choose some mitzvahs to do to up your game and pick up more mitzvahs before Rosh Hashanah. Show Hashem what you're capable of doing in the next year, and then have a very meritorious next year.
Lots of hints this week.
Lots of hints. Lots of hints. If you can't find at least one mitzvah out of this parsha that moves you, then I don't know what to do. But I'm going to spend most of our time today, hopefully, on Shiluach HaKen. Shiluach HaKen is this mitzvah of sending away the mother bird. So I'm going to spend a lot of time on that mitzvah today, if we can, if it merits. I want to hit some others on the way there, and show you how Rashi connects these together.
Have you done that one yourself?
I have done that one myself. There was a year, I don't know, it was kind of a weird year. It was when we first moved into the community, so it was about 20 years ago, probably 18 to 20 years ago. And a number of us had birds. And the Rabbi Meyer had, it was a little tree then, now it's a big evergreen tree, in the front of his sidewalk, right on the tree. A little tree at that point, and there was a nest right in the tree. And so there was, and it was a kosher bird, and it has to be a kosher bird. And so there were people that did the mitzvah there. We had one in our front yard, a nest, and my wife and I did the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKen then. It's probably about 18 years ago. I think it was when the old was still. I think it was a robin, maybe, or yeah, kosher. The most birds are kosher. The non-kosher birds are all listed in the Torah. The reason we don't eat more birds is because you need to have a masorah as to what they are, because we don't know exactly. Hongs and birds that
Scavengers.
what do they do? They rip their prey. They the non-kosher birds, but the non-kosher, about 25 or 30 listed in the Torah. Parsha Re'eh and Parsha Re'eh and Parsha Shemini. Yeah.
That was something I never understood. Okay, so there's a mitzvah that before you take the egg, you have to chase the bird away.
Right.
That's a mitzvah if you want the egg, but to do it just to do a mitzvah in bread.
Oh, there's a focus about that, actually, about whether you can do it even if you don't want the eggs. You can.
You can, but why would you? You did.
Right. So basically,
And that.
because you shoot away, because when you're shooing away the mother bird does not fly away forever. She's there. She's screaming, actually.
Yeah.
So in fact, since we're talking about it, since I mentioned it, let's do it now. Let's do it first, and then I'll do the other mitzvahs later, right? So this is on page 1051. 1051. I'll just read the English for all of us. If a bird's nest happens to be before you on the road, on any tree or on the ground, young birds or eggs, and the mother is roosting on the young birds or the eggs, you shall not take the mother with the young. You shall surely send away the mother and take the young for yourself, so that it will be good for you, and you will prolong your days. That's the mitzvah. That's the mitzvah. Couple things to just maybe keep in mind. I'm just going to grab a number.
But that implies if you want the eggs and the young birds, but if you're just walking by and you have no motivation for that and you just do it because you think that's a mitzvah.
Well,
I think that's-
Well, people wear sit-sit,
They will what?
they wear sit-sit, would you normally wear a four-cornered garment? I mean, you're doing it only to
But
have
it's
the
not a
mitzvah.
command that you should do it. It's also implies if you want the eggs and the baby birds to eat. But if just walking by and you're not hungry and you don't eat that anyway, and just to do it, because you think that's a mitzvah, that I can't.
Oh,
I could see that. I don't understand it. Maybe you do.
you want both.
So why would you take the eggs if you weren't gonna eat them?
That's right, but the people apparently, oh, look, there's a bird in the nest. I think I want a mitzvah.
Well, it's eggs or young.
Or young, yeah.
So why would you take little baby birds unless you
Maybe they taste good.
yeah, dumplings.
There's this is in the Secta Hulin.
Yeah.
Chapter 8, I think.
Viciously, I was just walking down a path, and it probably was a nest with babies, and he's. What kind of even? I don't know, but they dove bomb, dive bomb that me, man, my eyes, and it wouldn't stop. It was fierce. Yeah, they're called the birds, or I don't know the movie. It is actually, it was one bird, that, and that movie, it was thousands.
Well, I'll find it in a second. There's a Gemara that goes into this this mitzvah, and there's Mishnahs on it. We'll see it maybe. It's not making it easy for me here. Pardon? More Nebuchim is the Rambam. More Nebuchim is Guide to the Perplexed, which I am right now, and I need a guide. Well, I'm going to talk about the mission and Bruchas on 33b. That basically says that if a person is davening for the Amid, leading the davening, and he decides to mention, Hashem, you should be as merciful to me as to us, as you are to the bird, and we take him down. If he says something like that, we don't let him daven anymore. We shut him up, bring him down.
Wow.
It's mentioning the Rachamim of Hashem on the bird. But I submit to you, is this mitzvah of sending away the mother bird, is it Rachamim?
That's the.
Is it Hashem's Rachamim on the animals?
Well, it's
on the birds?
And then having.
It is?
Watch what.
What's so Rachamim about it? You're shooing away the mother bird. She is chirping away because she's losing her young, right? She's probably going to fly off and commit suicide.
Oh, no, she'll have another season.
Oh, okay. So I'll have another season. Okay. But she just feels horrible about losing her young. I don't know if she knows she's going to have another season. Maybe she'll fly into somebody's window before. And so that's not very kind. Where's the Rachamim with that? And if you say the Rachamim is on the eggs and the birds, well, David just told us, you got to eat them.
Yeah, just.
You gotta want 'em.
Waiting.
You gotta want 'em. So where's the mercy there? Where's the mercy there? So there's there is mercy here, but where?
So you
How on you? What are you doing that's so merciful?
you
But you're thinking about being cruel to the bird.
Well, you're hungry.
You're being cruel to the bird.
It's possible
No.
that if you.
But then that's being merciful on yourself, right?
But I'm still thinking about the bird. I shouldn't get the.
But when you're thinking about the bird and she's crying and crying and it's,
Yeah.
please, Etta, don't send me. Don't take
That
the little
means,
chicks.
Because the Torah said we can eat the food before the animal and we're
How
being
does it teach you
kind.
compassion? That's what I'm saying. How does it teach you compassion?
Because we pushed the mother away, so we didn't kill the mother and her child on the same day.
So you're
And
not
the-
killing them on the same day, okay?
Yeah, and we are allowed by the Torah to eat the food. So,
Okay. It makes sense. It's in the chapter in Hulin on Osabes Bano. You're not allowed to check the mother and her child on the same day. And so it makes sense. It's in that parak. Pardon?
I wish Hamas knew that. Hamas.
So that's an aspect of it, that you're not going to take them and use them at the same time, not going to dispose of them on the same day. There's a mission in Hulin that says you're not even allowed to do this, to take the mother with the chicks, even for the purpose of doing a mitzvah with it, like using the bird for the mitzvah. The procedure for the mitzvah requires taking two birds. We've talked about it before. And then you send one away, you check the other one, you dip the blood in, you dip it in, and then you send the live bird away. But you're not even allowed to use it for that, right? If you do this mitzvah. And it has to happen upon you. You can't like plan to go out, it's got to just kind of happen upon you. It's got to be by happenstance, recognizing that Hashem puts a mitzvah in front of us.
You can do this like with a chicken farmer.
No, you can't do it with a chicken farmer. And it can't even be in your own backyard. It has to be in your front. I mean, in our case, in Denver, it has to be in your front yard so that it's not fenced in. It's not under an enclosure.
Hard to understand.
Ultimately, it's a chok, right? Ultimately, it's something we don't really understand the underlying reasons for it. But if you look at it, it's got elements of cruelty to it, and it also has beneficence, as you pointed out. There's a deeper sense of beneficence that's brought out by the Midrash. And that is that the Midrash says that when the mother bird is crying out, the sar of the birds, the angel overseeing the birds, feels so bad for the mother that he or she, whoever the sar of the birds is, cries out to Hashem, Hashem, please be merciful on your people. On your people. So if you look at the language in the Hebrew, so maybe even it says it in the English, it's a little bit better in the Hebrew. If you look at Pasuk Zion on page 1050, it says Shalach Tishalach, which is a double lashon. They translated as you shall surely send away, right? Shalach Tishalach es ha'em, should surely send away the mother. The es habonim tikach lo, and the bonim. What does bonim mean? Children.
Yeah.
Do birds have children?
Well, they're young. They're
Offspring,
yeah.
Offspring. So you have to use, if you read it literally though, what it's saying, and the offspring shall be yours. So what the Midrash says is that the offspring, meaning the person that does this mitzvah, will merit to have children. And in fact, that is a segula that they say about this particular mitzvah. In fact, there are organizations that for people that are trying to have children, they can't have children. So they have these farms and things like that where they're out in the open and they have these nests and they take people out there to do this mitzvah.
Does it work?
Yeah.
Do people have children? Do people have children? Do Jewish people have children?
Hopefully.
Then it must work.
It's obviously ironic that by robbing the mother bird of her kids, you then merit kids. I mean, that's
Right. But it says in the pasuk, if you look at the pasuk,
yeah.
right? Es habanim tikach lo, and you shall take the children.
Can I try another interpretation? When someone says Hashem be merciful on you, on us, on your children. If Hashem, if you can be cruel to the bird, the mother bird, please don't do the same to us.
So what Hashem answers the Tsar of the birds is he says, I'll be merciful on my children and I'll bring Mashiach. So what does Mashiach have to do with this? So what is Mashiach? Where does the Midrash bring anything about Mashiach? Where does that come from? So that comes from having children. Because at the beginning of the world, the neshamas were created, they were put in something called a goof. Goof means body, but it was put in something called a goof. And all the neshamas of all the time are in this goof, as well as the neshama of the Mashiach. And until all those neshamas come into the world, Mashiach can't come. So by having more and more children, which is the reward for this mitzvah, right? Which is the midrash's reward for the mitzvah, you're bringing Mashiach
By emptying the goof.
by emptying the goof, because you're now emptying all the neshamas. That's what they say. A lot of times people, chas v'sholom, have a miscarriage. So a lot of explanation about that is that neshama that got put into that fetus when the mother was still pregnant with her, even though it wasn't carried to term, that neshama nevertheless still came into the world. In fact, we bury stillbirth babies. We bury them. In fact, with a boy, you actually give them a bris. It's not on the 8th day or anything. I mean, you just give them a bris before you bury them. And then they're buried in a special place in the cemetery. There's not a funeral or anything, and there's no sitting shiva. There's no, unless the baby lives for 30 days after birth. There's no funeral. There's no shiva. And so just the father and a friend and the mother go and take the baby.
So it'd be like, is it 40 days after conception?
40 days after conception. That's when the neshama, that's what the tradition tells us, when the neshama comes in.
I thought the neshama didn't come in because the 30-day rule until the end of 30 days.
No, that's when it's not a nefel anymore after 30 days, but the neshama comes in 40 days after conception. So the neshama is there. So even though it's a stillbirth, the neshama still come into the world. And they say that to people, to comfort them, to comfort the families that, that there's a purpose for this. And, it's a good purpose and it's bringing Mashiach. It's a good thing. Anyway, in our mitzvah it says that. But in addition to that, our mitzvah says something else. It says, so that it will be good for you and you will prolong your days. There's one other mitzvah that has a phrase similar to that. Exactly. Honor your father and mother. And that says, honor your father and mother as Hashem your God commanded you, so that your days will be lengthened and so that it will be good for you. Right? And then it says on the land that Hashem your God gives you. But those two phrases, that your days will be lengthened and it will be good for you. In this one, it says it'll be good for you and will prolong your days. So different order, but these are the only two mitzvahs that have both of those concepts in them. And the question is, why is that the case? What's the comparison between Kibbud Av V'Aim and Shiluach HaKen?
Iran.
Then I didn't pronounce it properly. Shiluach HaKen and Kibbud Av V'Aim. Loosely run. The Shiluach HaKen mitzvah is a very cheap mitzvah, because what are you giving up by not taking the mother? The Gemara says a dinar. A dinar. It's not a very expensive thing. Okay, you don't have to buy the mother. You wanted to have a bird, you wanted to have chicken soup, and now you don't have chicken soup. You got to wait until the chicks hatch, till the eggs hatch. But you send away the mother. So it's not a very expensive mitzvah. How expensive is the mitzvah of Kibbud Av V'Aim? How is that expensive?
Very.
can be hugely expensive.
Yes.
The truth is that halakhically, you don't need to provide for them out of your money. However, there's a case in the Gemara where there was a guy who had a mother, and the mother took his wallet, and he had like thousands of dollars in his wallet, and she threw it in the Yam HaMelech. And what do you think he did?
Tell them to recover it.
Nothing. Right? What would a regular person probably, what are you doing? And berating her, how could you do this? And that would not be kibbud av v'aim. So he was exhibiting kibbud av v'aim because of not doing that. And then there's a story in the Gemara, Dasan ben Asima, who was a non-Jew. We learn this mitzvah of kibbud av v'aim from a non-Jew. He had these gems that they needed for the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol, very expensive. They were in a safe, and his father had the key to the safe, and his father was sleeping, and he had the key to the safe under his pillow. So the Jews came to him and said, we know you have these stones. We would like to pay you $1 gazillion for them. And he said, I'm sorry, but I can't wake up my father because that wouldn't be kibbud av. And so they went away.
But
And
the
they-
Jews don't have that mitzvah. It's not one of the 7.
It's not one of the 7 mitzvahs, but we can still learn from them how to really honor your parent. Now, we're not supposed to wake up our parents if they're asleep, right? I mean, I suppose if they ask us, will you please wake me up for this? But let's say that, right? We're not supposed to wake them up there because if they're sleeping, not supposed to disturb them. So here was a guy who was willing to give away $1 gazillion and not do it. Expensive mitzvah. Now, what happened to him, he was then rewarded by Hashem because they had a paraduma that was born into their herd. So the Jews came back and they said, we'd like to buy this paraduma from you. He said, fine, it's the same price of the gems. So he exactly recouped. I think, the paraduma has to be 3 years old. So I don't know whether he had to wait 3 years for this to happen or not. But anyway, he got his money back for doing it, got rewarded. The sad part about that story is that non-Jews really only get their reward in Olam Hazeh. When we do a mitzvah, kibbud av v'aim, we not only get the fruits in this world, as it says in the mission that we read after we say Birkas Torah in the morning, that there are things that we get the paros for in this world, and we don't use up our principle in Olam Haba, and one of them is kibbud av v'aim. So it's a huge reward witness. And here we see it's a long life. We get a long life, and we also get a good. It'll be good. A good and long life. What's better than good and long life? I don't know. That's pretty good. But we get Olam Haba also.
Now, does, after parents die and you do donations or?
Absolutely.
Nice.
Absolutely. That is fulfilling the mitzvah of kibbud av v'aim. Absolutely. And not only that, but even doing good works. Because the only reason you're here is because of your parents and Hashem, of course. 3 partners in every person's life. The father, the mother, and Hashem. And that's why the person's here. So by honoring the father, by doing things well in this life, you're honoring your parents in the next world and you're raising them up by doing good things. Even if you don't do it specifically, l'shem in honor of my parents, But if you do it like the Hayatans have done these sidurim that they give to the bar and bas mitzvah kids, in the memory of their parents, right? So that's a great thing.
Okay, getting back to birds.
Okay, fine.
That's the story of Elisha Ben Avuya.
Well, I'm gonna get to it. I'm gonna get to it. I mean, you already pushed me out of order anyway. Because I'm doing this whole thing, which I was going to do last. I'm doing it first on the birds. So now there are these 2 mitzvahs that have a good life and a long life. There's 2 mitzvahs for that. Why do we need 2 mitzvahs for that? And basically, it's kind of a long analysis, and I won't take you through it, but basically it's to teach us that all of the mitzvahs are that way. It's teaching us that all mitzvahs are good for us and give us a long life. That's an interesting thing. But just with these two, there's two mitzvahs specifically, that's where the Torah specifically says, good and long life. You want to interrupt me again?
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, so at a certain point, I dissociated myself from, to a degree from Torah and from having been raised Orthodox. And one of the reasons is my father, I've never seen anybody with so much kibbud as my father. And he died at the age of 67. The last few years of his life were really not good.
Hashem's judgment is perfect. And we can't understand and know why those kinds of things happen. And so we don't know. But I can tell you that Hashem's judgment is perfect. And so that happened for a reason. I don't know the reason, but it happened definitely for a reason. And it's 100% right. It's 100% emes. That I know.
He was also a big Baal tzedakah.
That I know.
He was ever turned
That I
into
know.
a simple animal.
That I know. That I know. And I'm sure he never did anything wrong ever.
Oh, I'm not sure.
I'm sure he didn't. I'm sure he didn't do anything wrong ever,
No,
because
I-
if he would have done anything wrong ever, then you would have an explanation. Because then you would say, well, the reason that it happened was because he did X, Y, Z. So I'm sure, because you're telling us the story, that your father never did anything wrong ever. He was perfect in kibbud av v'em. He was perfect in giving tzedakah. He always treated the people with great, great respect, and he gave them always more than he was capable of doing, and took away from the mouths of his children in order to be able to give tzedakah.
Business and left me hanging dry, but that's another part of it. But
Sounds like you have a little resentment there.
no,
Maybe against
I said
Hashem.
that for how-
Maybe against Hashem.
My father was my hero. and
Maybe against
I did
Hashem.
everything
Maybe
he
you're
said.
resenting Hashem.
No, I'm questioning.
Sounding
Just
like,
Elisha Ben
sounding
Avuya
like,
did.
sounding like and you want to get into Elisha Ben Avuya?
Elisha Ben
Sounds
Avuya.
like you're resenting Hashem. Because what did Elisha Ben Avuya do? Let's talk about Elisha Ben
What
Avuya. You
did
know
he
who he
do?
is? Elisha Ben Avuya, he's mentioned actually by that name in Pirkei Avos. He has one mission in Pirkei Avos. But he was a sage, a great, great sage. He was the teacher of Rabbi Meir, who in himself is a great, great sage. But Elisha Ben Avuya became a heretic. There were 4 people that went to the Pardes: Rabbi Akiva, Elisha Ben Avuya, Ben Zoma, and Ben Azai. Those 4 went to the Pardes, which is going into a deep mystical connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There are in this elevation that they went for their neshamas, it very much challenges of paradox. When you come to these particular places above the world, you see the paradoxes. A paradox, for example, that I have to realize that on Rosh Hashanah, that Hashem is going to decree exactly what I'm going to make for the next year. But next year, I'm going to have to work for that parnosa. So I've got to know that Hashem is telling me what it was, but at the same time, I've got to do hishtadlos, I've got to do an effort in order to be able to do it. Or a person gets sick. And we know that the only reason that person got sick is because that's exactly what Hashem determined that person need. But yet, we have to take care of that person. We have to daven for that person. We have to, how do we do that? Those are all paradoxical, right? So there's many, but they're all centered on the fact that there's a perspective from Hashem and there's a perspective from us. Our perspective is that things are real, they're solid. And Hashem's perspective is nothing. There's no separations, there's no places, there's no things, there's no differentiation in any of us. But our perception is we're all individuals. So that's another paradigm. Anyway, there are, going up in these levels of meditation, going up in these levels of learning, there are paradoxes, and one can become negatively affected by those paradoxes if one can't understand how to resolve them or accept them. And that's what happened to Elisha Ben Avuya. It's what happened to Ben Zoma, and what's happened to Ben Azai. Ben Azai died. Ben Zoma came back crazy, and Elisha Ben Avuya came back a heretic. Now, there are things that happened to him that caused his heretical beliefs. And one of the things, it's not the only thing, but one of the things that happened was he saw a man ask his son to please climb up a ladder, go take the eggs from the bird's nest, and shoo away the mother bird. So this son was doing both mitzvahs that promise a good and long life. And he fell off the ladder and was killed. And he was young. So where is the good and long life? So says Elisha Ben Avuya, now known as Acher. What does he say? Torah can't be true.
Yeah,
Torah can't be true.
yeah.
Because the Torah said that he would have a good and long life, and we see this kid didn't have a good and long life.
Made me.
He had a short life and a bad life.
Made me question. It created a lot of.
That's why I'm bringing this. That's why I'm
situations of
bringing the story.
conflict for me.
Hopefully, I'm bringing the story. So listen deep.
Okay.
Make yourself new ears. Do you know what that means?
I'm listening.
You know what make yourself new ears means?
Make yourself listen. Make
Make yourself get rid of your bias,
Yeah.
get rid of your preconceived notions, get rid of your perceptions, and listen as if you are a newborn babe. Listen from a perspective of openness
Okay.
and not challenge.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Rabbi Yossi says in the Gemara, he says that you know what it means, a good and long life? What it's talking about is Olam Haba. It's not talking about Olam Hazeh. There are rewards for mitzvahs, but the rewards for the mitzvahs are in Olam Haba. They are not in Olam Hazeh. They're not in Olam Hazeh. And that's what it says in Pirkei Avos, that mitzvah gereres mitzvah, that the reward for a mitzvah is another mitzvah. Get another mitzvah. Because the ultimate reward is what we Jews are living for. We're trying to be what they call a ben olam haba. A ben olam haba or a bas olam haba is a person that has an understanding not of what it is, but only that it is. We don't know what olam haba is going to be. We don't know what the ultimate olam haba is going to be. But we have to know as Jews that there is a olam haba. And we have to know as Jews, the Rambam says these in his 13 principles, and we have to know that there's a reward and punishment for what we did in this world. And we see people that get rewarded who we know are evil people. And we see people that we know are great people, that we know had everything in this world, but they had hard lives or short lives. So the ultimate reward is in Olam Haba.
Good radical.
We don't. I think the word
No, you
rationalization
understand.
takes you back to your preconceived notion.
It doesn't say it. It says that Lamont.
It just says
You'll
it's.
have many years in this world. Is pretty much what it says.
Why can't it mean in the next world? Why can't it mean in Olam Haba?
Nobody dies.
It says prolong your days.
Prolong your days. But another thing that prolong your days can mean is not have more days to live to be 120, let's say, but maybe each day is going to be filled with productivity. Each day is going to be filled with that
My
productivity.
answer to it was I just don't understand.
Okay,
I don't understand.
okay.
We can
never-
accept that from you, David.
Well, what does Achen mean?
It means other.
It's no longer, well, there is a book, very good book, which you will not read.
I have it, but I didn't read it.
What
It's
is it?
about affair.
It's called the,
And there's a lot of
leaf, the
similarities.
unturned
to
leaf,
things that
what's it
happened
called?
to him That happened to me. It wasn't just the bird,
what's it called? The unturned leaf,
as a driven leaf.
as a driven leaf. But there are other things that happened to him.
Everybody could read.
Other things that happened to him, I disagree with that, but other things happened to Acher too. They said it really started at the time of his bris. Because at the time of his bris, there was a very great sage who came to the bris, which Acher's father actually treated disrespectfully.
So
And-
Acher stayed a heretic, a non-believer,
Right,
at the end of his days.
after till the end of his days. And then what happened to him, the Gemara goes into what happened to him. So because he was such a Torah scholars can't go to Gehenna.
Mhm.
Torah scholars do not go to Gehenna. So Acher was suspended between Gehenna. He couldn't go to Gehenna and get cleansed. And because he wasn't cleansed, he couldn't go to Gan Eden. So he's in the Olam and Neshamas, but he's between these two things. So what happens? So his student, Rabbi Meir, when Rabbi Meir dies, Rabbi Meir says, I'm going to bring Acher out of Gehenna. I'm going to bring him out, or no, I'm going to bring him to Gehenna. He needs to go to Gehenna before he can go in, because you can't go into Gan Eden until you're purified. But from whatever wrongs there were, you have to be purified him in Gehenna. So Rabbi Meir says, when he dies, I'm going to bring Acher to Gehenna. So they bury Rabbi Meir where they buried Acher, where they buried Elisha Ben Avuya, and then they saw for years afterwards smoke coming up from the grave. So the Gemara says, right, smoke is coming up from the grave.
Thermal boom.
Whatever reason, naturally you want to say, right? Anyway, it was because both of them went to Gehenna together.
Yeah.
And then when Rabbi Yochanan, who was a student of Rabbi Meir, when he passed away, he said, I'm going to bring them both to Gan Eden. And when he died, they buried him in the same place around where Rabbi Meir and Elisha Ben Avuya were buried. And then the smoke went away.
According to
And the Gemara says that they're all in Gehenna. I mean, it's all in Gan Eden. They're all in Gan Eden, waiting for Yom HaMashiach, when they'll be Techiyas HaMesim, they'll be brought back. And we'll die, we'll have Techiyas HaMesim again and go to Olam Haba, which we don't know how that's going to be, except we know it's going to be spiritual. So that is, that's a little bit about the Shiluach HaKen in terms of how it works. It's a cruelty that leads to a rachamim, to a mercy. And the mercy is really on the Jewish people, as the Midrash points out. And so what happens is that because people are having children, and children are bringing about the coming of the Mashiach, because each generation is closer and closer and closer to the end, to the gates, and we'll be able to bring Mashiach, and people will do tshuva, and we'll have Mashiach. So that's the rachamim that's coming out of it. The essence is to say about Hashem that he only has rachamim, which is what the Tzliach Tzibor saying in the Mishnah and Bruchas, and why we take him down, because Hashem is not that way. It's not that simple. Hashem is not only rachamim. Hashem has many and varied attributes, and he applies them in ways that we cannot understand, that are for our good only, and they're applied in perfection to exactly what we need, when we need it, how we need it. And so David's father needed, for some very, very good reason, to have a difficult end and to have only a 67-year life. And that was needed for a reason. And that reason can be way beyond. It's like a ripple. You throw a pebble into the middle of a pond and it ripples out. And the ripples, as it ripples out, affects many different things growing along the way, and the fish that are in the pond and so forth. So as something happens to a particular person in the sphere that person lives in, that affects the people in the sphere in various different ways. Every way that the people that are affected in that sphere are affected in a way that is exactly what they need, in the way that they need it to happen. So you're in different degrees from people who pass away, sometimes very close, one of the 7 relatives, very close, very painful, very difficult. And so it affects the person in that way. Sometimes you hear about a person that passes away and you're not that close to that person. So it has some kind of effect. And then sometimes you don't even hear about a person passing away. I think there are millions of people out there that passed away in the last month that I didn't hear about. I didn't get a funeral notice. I didn't get an announcement. They weren't in the IJN obituaries.
But you know.
But I know that they must have died. Must have been people out there that died, but I didn't know. In India, I didn't know who they were. So it had a very, very little effect, if anything. Sometimes you have a big effect, like there was a tsunamin once in, right? Indonesia, and thousands of people died. 450,000. And that's something that does affect. that does affect us, right? Oh, we don't know the individual people that died, but we know when something, a catastrophe like that happens, it means that it's something that I need to pay attention to, and it's something that I need to kind of grow from and figure out, how I'm supposed to mourn something like that, how I'm supposed to process something like that. And so that happens. But I'm sure that there's millions of people that die that I never hear about, not in mass and not in individuality for sure. And so it has different effects on us when that happens. And the closer we are to a person, the more profound that effect is going to be. And the more we have to understand and trying to get ourselves to have emunah, to have betachon. Really, this is a case of betachon. Emunah is having faith. Betachon is kind of putting your money where your mouth is. Right? Where betachon is something that is difficult that happens, and you have to have the emunah that it was good and that it was the right thing at the right time. And that's the betachon. That's the trust that what Hashem did was the right thing. That's the trust that we have to have. And I know that that's true. Can I react to it always in that way? Not always. It's hard, especially the closer the tragedy is to a particular person, the harder it is to have that betachon and a trust in Hashem. It's good. But I know, at least from a distance, that everything Hashem does is good and everything Hashem does is perfect. And I can know that's true. When it happens to me personally, a little bit difficult when the money, when the rubber hits the road. But at least if I can do it in the abstract, then hopefully, if and when it does happen to me, then I'll be able to do it in the real time also. When the rubber hits the road, I'll be able to at least be better.
So here's my question, which I think about a lot. I have two sons. Nobody could have better sons, more kibbutz out than they demonstrate. They're wonderful sons, but they are totally dissociated from our religion. Does that mean they're going to have good manners in the Olam Haba just because of that one mitzvah?
Doesn't been a Sina, doesn't been Nasina, has a life in Olam Haba for the Kivud Abraham that he did, because he's in the Gemara in Kedushin, and many thousands, many, I'll even say millions of Jews have learned that Gemara and taken away from it what they should do with regard to Kivud Abraham, because it's brought there to basically discuss what Kivud Abraham should be. And so therefore he has the merit of having facilitated, at the very least, the Kivud Abraham of 100 generations, maybe 200 generations, probably not that many. There's probably been 300 generations since Har Sinai. So say 200 generations of people, maybe this was 1,000 years later. So 200 generations of people doing Kivud Abraham. That's a pretty big merit. Non-Jews get a reward in Olam Haba also.
I'll let them know.
And so even though they're not doing other things, I'm sure Dasan ben Asina did not. He was probably not, doing tzedakah and things like that. I mean, he's still interested in money. We see by the red heifer, right, what happened. So I'm sure that he was not doing, all the things that he should have done properly. So therefore, he's still going to get a huge reward, because look at the effect that he's had on hundreds of generations of Jewish people in doing Kivud Av, that we learn Kivud Av from him. That's an amazing thing.
About it, so
well, now you do, and now you do. And so he even gets more reward now that you know about it. So that's what happens. So a person does one mitzvah in their life, they're going to get a reward for that mitzvah in their life. Right? If they do many non-good things, so then they're Rishonim, so then they are going to get that reward probably in this world rather than the next world. They may not make it to the next world, because the Rishonim are not going to make it through the Tikiyas, amazing. But as long as they're not Rishonim, there's a big difference between a Rasha and a Tzaddik, right? There's 99% of the people are between those two spectrums. There's a Tzaddik and there's a Rasha, but there's 99% of us that are Benanim, right? We talk about it every Rosh Hashanah, right? The Tzaddikim are signed into the book of life for next year, And the Rishayim are signed into the book of death for next year. And the Benanim are in the middle book, right? And we're signed into, and that's why we need Yom Kippur. So that's how it goes. So there's most of us are in between. And we're going to get rewarded for the things we deserve to be rewarded for. And we're going to cleanse the things that we did not do properly. Now that cleansing is going to be painful. If we don't do it by tshuva in this world, we're going to have to do it in Gehenna. And Gehenna was once described to me as being embarrassment. Have you ever been embarrassed in public? I have been. It is horrible. It's also a very spiritual feeling. If you can even recall it when you think back about the experience and then feel it again. And it's a spiritual thing. So that the canon is described to me as being embarrassment, public embarrassment. What's the embarrassment? Shame. What's the embarrassment? That you're going to be shown what you could have been versus what you are. And when you have that, if you think about it, when Adam and Chava, before the Chet, didn't have clothes. They didn't have clothes. They had to get fig branches after they committed the sin, after they committed the Chet. And then Hashem got them skin, or he brought them hides to put on. We call it even a hide, right? Because it hides the nakedness. Because the nakedness reminds us of the fact that we're animals. And we try to have the perception that we're spiritual beings, more spiritual. And the difference between the two is vast. So we cover it up by wearing clothes. And the clothes reveal and they conceal. So what they conceal is the nakedness of our bodies, physical bodies, but what they reveal is the dignity that's within us that is now shining out. And that's what's revealed by the clothing. So it conceals and reveals. And it's called a beged, which is from bogod, which means treachery, because it can betray us, because it can be not who we really are. Sometimes people, wear things that are not really who they are, or who they want to be, and so maybe they're trying to put on a false front. So they call it beged. Beged's clothing, but basically what we're trying to reveal is the inside of us through how we are. I mean, this has been a big thing with me even before I was religious. The clothes make the man, right? Have you ever heard that expression? So I was a big proponent in all of my law firms, and when they were all my own law firms, I went a lot farther. But when I went to Baker, when I merged into Baker, so a lot of young associates and young partners didn't wear ties, didn't wear suits. What? How can you be a lawyer and not wear a suit? Come on.
Bow tie.
I don't care if it's a bow tie or regular tie, but a lawyer needs to be properly dressed, right? Okay. Anyway, so that's my soapbox on that issue. It didn't go very far at Baker, by the way.
Agreed, but that's why you make all that money.
Even non-tie wearing lawyers make a lot of money too.
I know, but it's hard when they got a polo shirt on and write the check to them.
That's right. Or shorts, right? Or right.
But we're always in front of the big boss.
There you go. So you have to realize who you're representing, right? And I always felt that I had to dress well because I represented really important, good people. And I wanted to be a good representative of them because they're really important, good people. But if we're representing Hashem, and now we realize that, how much more so? Isn't that a kal v'chomer? That I should dress up? Maybe I should wear a coat and tie.
These days.
Oh, I guess I do.
These days, that's more important and good in the same phrase.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Okay, that was a long class. I told Mrs. Michaels that I would stop at 1 because she needs this computer. So I have there's 5 minutes left, and so I want to do in the 5 minutes is just give you a very quick rundown of how these mitzvahs associate with each other. All right, since we spend all our time on Shiluach HaKen.
One question.
Yes,
At the beginning, the Ki Teitzei,
yeah,
does that
that's
mean when you will go?
when you go to war.
Oh, so.
Ki Teitzei lemilchama. The whole phrase is Ki Teitzei lemilchama, when you go to war.
Maybe it's talking about all this. Because
It is talking about all these mitzvahs. There are 74 mitzvahs in this
it's
book.
not-
So,
it's-
Just the first one is about the war,
Yeah, but I think it refers to all the
and you
mitzvahs.
can take a word.
maybe.
Mhm.
It connects certainly the first set through the second, through the beginning of the second Aliyah. They're connected, which is what I was just going to do. Do you want to do it?
No.
Why not?
She's right on your-
So the first one, the first one is a Yofas Tar, which means Yofas Tar, come on, a beautiful captive.
Oh, okay.
Dude, you know that.
Well, now I do.
You could have known that. So it's a beautiful captive. So sometimes in wartime, and the reason why it says specifically war here is because the adrenaline and things in wartime excite a Yetzer Hara in a person, and he sees a beautiful captive. Rashi says she's dressed up beautifully to try and entice the other soldiers to weaken them, and so that the other side will win. So a person sees a woman like that, and he says, "I want that woman." So in order to defend against the Yetzer Hara, the Torah put in for a man to be able to take her, but she has to go through a process of conversion, which is really, she has to let her nails grow, or some say cut, it's goes both ways, shave her head, take off her beautiful clothing, cry over her mother and father who were killed in the war. And then if he still wants her after a process like that, so then he can marry her. Then the Torah says, if a man has two wives, a loved wife and a hated wife. So Rashi says, who's the hated wife? That's the Yofas Tar. That's the one that he took in the war. That's the hated wife. And then guess what happens? The next thing we have is the Ben Sora Mor. The next thing we have is the Pishtayim, is the inheritance. And the double share has to go to the firstborn. And because this guy did this not good thing, but basically a thing to withstand his Yetzer Hara of taking the beautiful captive, and she's now the hated wife, and guess who gives birth to the firstborn of his children? The hated wife. And he nevertheless can't disinherit that firstborn, even though he wants to. And then what happens is then we have the Mitzvah Mora. The Mitzvah Mora is the rebellious child, a 13-year-old, and between the time he's 13 and 13 and a quarter, right? 3 months, he steals from his parents. He goes out and buys kosher wine and kosher meat, and he has parties with his Jewish 10 of his Jewish no good friends. They're not bad, but they're not good either. They're just kind of neutral. And then he feeds his addiction. And then Rashi says, what do we do with this guy? When he's 13 and 3 months, we stone him to death. What kind of, where's tshuva in this? Isn't this, and this parsha is always in the middle of Elul, where we're doing tshuva. So where's the tshuva in this? So the only reason we can execute him is if his parents, and I'm going to just really cut quickly to this, he's got 2 perfect people parents, and they have a perfect relationship. So the Gemara says, never happened, never will happen. Because it's nurture versus nature, right? In order to be a Ben Sora Mora, has to be totally nature, which means that everything else has to be perfect. His parents are perfect. They're perfect individuals. They have a perfect marriage. They brought him up perfectly. Everything is fine. And this guy is still bad. So we have to kill him. We got to get him out of the world. But the only time we do that is when we have it perfect to get there. Otherwise, if there's any nurture involved in the thing, then he can do tshuva. And that's what we have to realize about ourselves, that we're not perfect. Is that easy to recognize? Yeah, probably so. And so we need to work on ourselves during this time and get perfect. So that's a Ben Sora Mora. What happens if the Ben Sora Mora is not killed when he's 13? So he'll go out to the crossroads. He'll become an armed robber. He'll end up killing someone. He'll get arrested. He'll go to jail, and then he'll get executed. And then we hang an executed person. We don't hang him to kill him. We hang him after the execution. There's only 4 kinds of judicial killings in Judaism. From the most lenient up, the Chenek is the most lenient, which is strangulation, then Sayef, which is by the sword, then the Sreifa, which is burning, and then Skila, which is stoning. And so those are the four that we have. But after any one of those executions, we hang the person up, but only until nightfall, and we got to get him down before nightfall because it's an affront to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because Tselem Elokim. Every person has an image of Hashem in them, and therefore it's an embarrassment to Hashem if he's hanging up there. So those are the mitzvahs that connect that way. Then there's mitzvahs that connect going the opposite direction. Good, going in towards the good side. If a person chews away a bird, a mother bird, and he does that mitzvah, then the next mitzvah that happens after that, after sending away the mother bird, is what? He has a house. And he's got to build a makkeh. He's got to build a fence around the flat roof on his house. But he can't do that mitzvah unless what? Hashem gives him a house. So if he does the mitzvah, the bird, so then he merits to get the house, and he puts the fence up. And then if he does that mitzvah, then guess what? He's going to have a vineyard, and he's then going to do the mitzvah of not having kalayim, not having mixtures of grain and grapes together. And so he'll have to have a carrot, and he'll have to have a vineyard in order for that to happen. And then he'll get another mitzvah, and the other mitzvah he gets is a field. And then he'll be able to do the mitzvah of not plowing his field with a ox and a donkey, right? With mixed species, right? And won't do that. And then guess what? If he does that mitzvah, Hashem will give him clothing, give him a beautiful garment, but he's got to check it to make sure that it doesn't have wool and linen in it, so not shotness in it together. And then if he has that beautiful garment and it doesn't have shotness in it, guess what? He can put tzitzis on it. So he can have tzitzis on that garment. And then guess what will happen? Says a man will marry a wife. So then he'll be given a wife. It's so good. But then if he divorces his wife and she marries someone else, he can't bring her back. He can't take her back. And so it goes on and goes on. And basically then we have a situation about a person that marries a wife and defames his wife. And that's a very bad sin. And then so it goes on and it goes on. And then I'll just say one last mitzvah towards the end, almost the very end. And that is talking about yibum. Yibum is kind of an ultimate chesed, because it's marrying a brother's wife where the brother died without children and bringing into the world from the source, the same source. Brothers have the same source. They came from the same two parents. Right? So they have the same source. So that allows the deceased brother to be basically brought back into the world by his brother having children with his widow.
And that child gets his dead father's property?
No, the brother who does Yibum gets the dead father's property. But then when that father dies, then it can go to that child.
All of it goes to that child.
Right. Well, not that share of it that came from the deceased father goes to.
So it's a soul?
And the soul in some way, however that works, that source, neshama, is going to go into that child because it's coming from the same source, right? Because the brothers came from the same source. They had the same father. So the father's neshama came into those brothers in some way, and that's going to then go into that child. If the woman marries somebody outside of the family, then that's not going to happen. So that's why, and so it's an ultimate chesed to do this, and it's something we learned from Abraham Avinu, because Abraham married his brother's daughter, not his brother's wife, but his brother's daughter, and carried on his brother's neshama in that way, which is why he so wanted to have a child, and he was 100 years old until that happened. From Sarah, right?
And the surviving brother, he could still marry other women.
Yes.
So you can marry a sister-in-law and then continue to do whatever you want.
Correct. And those before Rabbeinu Gershon. Now, since Rabbeinu Gershon, Ashkenazim can't have more than one wife.
And you're supposed to you can have multiple kids for that widow?
Yes, absolutely.
And they would then split them.
Yes, because she's considered to be his full wife after after they have relations. Okay,
Wow.
we have to stop because and right. Oh, and thank you very much for bringing that up because it's very important because we have a mitzvah to remember that we're supposed to wipe out Amalek. And some people say that remembrance every day after davening. But if you don't, we have a special Torah reading for that called Parshat Zachar. And in Parshat Zachar, we learn about Amalek from Bishalach. And we learn and we learn from on Parshat Zachar, we learn from here. And then on Purim, we learn from Bishalach, which is where the battle actually took place. And so you can, if you missed hearing Parshat Zachar this last year for whatever reason, you can make a tikkun for that by listening to the Mafter portion this Shabbos.